Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It has definitely been a minute and it is great to be here. I am actually so enthusiastic about what we're going to discuss today because it has been bothering me for a few months now. And let me get straight to the topic. So recently, of course, our ever-changing fashion has changed again. Well, that happens, and there's been a major rotation of creative directors. And although there are some controversial appointments, for example, Demna for Gucci, who could expect that? And also some of them have already had their debut, for example, J.W. Anderson at Dior. But the question that most of the publications were asking when they were reporting on this change is, where are the women? Well, I also asked myself that question. Actually, it came up in a conversation with a friend, and then I started looking for it. I started looking for the reasons why there are not many female creative directors right now. And I've come across some very interesting figures. For example, there is this article from One Granary where they have reported that 74% of fashion students are women, whereas they hold only 12% of creative director roles at major fashion houses. But fashion is what is majorly considered a very feminine domain that is built upon femininity and being a woman and constantly promotes so-called female empowerment. So what happened there? The disparity is even sharper with the fact that most of these major fashion houses at the moment are led by men, and, well, a great number of whom are gay men. So in this video, I'm not going to dive into the societal reasons why men are taken onto these roles. I'm not gonna talk about race. I'm not gonna talk about salaries, etc., etc. Because this video would be like 10 hours long, and we don't have that. So I want to treat this video as a sort of a philosophical playground where we'll just think about some ideas, review some of the theories that might answer our question of why most of the creative directors at major fashion houses now are gay men. And when I tried looking this information up, of course, I went to Google Scholar and I found out that there is nothing on this topic. And I'm honestly very surprised that nobody has ever asked this question in the academic setting with the wonderful resources that we have at the moment. So here it is. And to get to this topic, we need to start from the very beginning. Of course, women's image and women's clothing has been controlled by men in one way or another for, well, centuries, if not millennia, and probably since the beginning of time. This is, of course, no news, since we all know about the system of oppression called patriarchy that disguises the oppression by cultural, religious, or societal norms, forcing women to conform to them in their image and their clothing. Yet men started having the leading role in creating women's garments, mainly during the rise of the European royal courts. Their male tailors were often the official dressmakers for queens and noblewomen, and clothing was a political tool, a symbol of national identity, dynastic wealth, and dynastic fertility. The role demanded visibility, prestige, and courtly maneuvering, all public-facing tasks that often excluded women in favor of men who could command authority in patriarchal settings. By mid-19th century, Charles Frederick Worth completely revolutionized fashion and presented himself as an artist and a couturier who dictated the fashion styles to his clients. This inversion of the customer-maker relationship cemented the designer as a cultural arbiter. The lineage flows from Worth to Christian Dior, who in 1947 redefined post-war femininity with the new look. A waist, soft shoulders, full skirts, and onward to Yves Saint Laurent and Cristobal Balenciaga, whose designs became synonymous with modern elegance. Through the 20th century, these fashion designers were celebrated not only as garment creators, but also the creators of femininity. This might not make perfect sense to you at the moment, but what I'm trying to say is that these designers made woman their canvas where her image was authored by a man. And here is where we get into the interesting part, at least for me, and let's talk theory.
To say that gender is performative is a little different, because for something to be performative means that it produces a series of effects.
And of course, when we talk about gays and the girls, we cannot avoid using the queer theory. Judith Butler's theory of gender performativity asserts that gender is not innate, but a repeated performance constructed through acts, styles, and codes. Gay male designers positioned outside heterosexual male desire, yet fluent in its visual grammar, can treat women as a theatrical role, one they can manipulate, stylize, and even exaggerate without being bound by a lived female embodiment. Another important reading on the topic is Susan Sontag's Notes on Camp that frames this as deliberate artifice, femininity amplified to the point where its artificial nature becomes the point. When Laura Mulvey's male gaze warns us that women are often rendered as passive spectacles for female viewers, gay male designers complicate this. They may inhabit the male gaze, but they are not its traditional heterosexual agents. Instead, they often twist it, producing women who are hyper-idealized, untouchable, and sometimes unsettling. Here, femininity becomes a costume, and sometimes celebratory, sometimes alienating. Male designer becomes its director. Performative femininity that is often encountered in queer circles is no news. It is not a new phenomenon and not something that has appeared just now in this recent rotation of creative directors, but in my opinion, it lays out the foundation for what we're going to discuss now, and that's the society in which we live in, and society that demands this performative femininity, even from women.
Tout ce qui était directement vécu s'est éloigné dans une représentation.
I have been recently fascinated by the work of Debord. I cannot believe that I've never read anything from this philosopher before, but even though his books were written a couple of decades ago, I think they relate perfectly to the current modernity. And as he wrote in his Society of the Spectacle, in societies where modern conditions of production prevail, life is presented as an immense accumulation of spectacles. Everything that was directly lived has receded into a representation. The spectacle is not a collection of images, it is a social relation between people and is mediated by images. And fashion, specifically luxury fashion, has become a perfect prime example of this spectacle, as the clothes are no longer consumed in the lived, experienced way. It is all images on Instagram, on social media, and even the runway shows, they are created for cameras and influencers and social media feed as much as they are created for the buyers, if not more. Debord's observation that we have shifted from being to having to appearing resonates sharply in the fashion economy, where being is wearing clothes in daily life, having is acquiring branded goods as status markers, and appearing is curating images to signify status, even without ownership. The creative director's role in this context is not primarily to clothe, but to stage. Gay male designers, without living through the experience of womanhood, can treat woman as a canvas, as an image-first project, the perfect raw material for the spectacle. So let's see how the theory works in the real world of fashion. So I suggest we look at the very interesting archetype of a male fashion designer who is primarily a seductor, and that is Tom Ford. Ford's Gucci era, particularly his fall 1996 show, epitomized the calculated performance of female power and sexuality. The collection was a study in precision tailoring, plunging necklines, satin finishes, and a deliberate play between concealment and exposure. Black tailored coats with silk linings, sleek trousers, and barely buttoned shirts created an aura of dangerous glamour. The models moved through a stark spotlight, their entrances designed to stun. Ford's genius lay in sexualizing women without making them submissive. He also famously popularized the daring exposed G-string, turning undergarments into a status symbol and sparking both scandal and desire. This attitude was underpinned by his unapologetic objectification, once telling an interviewer, "First of all, I love women, but I lust after beautiful women in the way that I lust after a beautiful piece of sculpture. This will probably get me in trouble, or a beautiful car." Here, Ford collapses the boundary between woman as subject and woman as luxury object, aligning her with collectible, high-performance commodities. As Vogue Saramova noted, his fall 1995 show was one of those hidden in the solar plexus moments that announced a new visual language of power and sex in fashion. If Tom Ford's woman in the mid-90s embodied this sexy, powerful creature, then Alexander McQueen in his 1996 fall-winter show rendered her almost mystical, beautiful, terrifying, and unsettling in a way. Shown in a candlelit church with skeletons seated front row, the show unfolded like a gothic mass. McQueen wove together beauty and blasphemy, denim and Victoriana lingerie-coded exposure and medieval severity. Models walked in pinstripe corsets, skirts with unfinished hems, and tops that resembled chainmail or nets, evoking both armor and vulnerability. One look featured a metallic painted-on bodice mimicking a nude torso under a cardigan, an unsettling play on objectification, recalling his own words. "I design clothes because I don't want women to look all innocent and naive. I want women to look stronger. I don't like women to be taken advantage of. I like men to keep their distance from women. I like men to be stunned by an entrance." Here, strength and spectacle merged in a fantasy of womanhood as divine and dangerous, capable of inspiring awe and fear in equal measure. Antlered headdresses, crimson linen trains, and sculptural tailoring heightened the sense that McQueen's women were not of this world. They were apparitions, warriors, saints, and sinners all at once. In the queer-coded tradition of many male designers, McQueen's gaze on femininity was not about excess, but about creation, building an image so potent it could never be contained by reality. And of course, I wouldn't be myself if I didn't bring up Demna, but I do think that he is a very important player in the discussion of femininity. However, he is drastically different from a lot of Western-born, I would say, creative directors, and his relationship with femininity is far more practical and more realistic than the two other designers that we've discussed. I don't think that his vision is rooted in this idealization or creating a false image, but it's more about inclusion, about the feeling of being seen or being anonymous, up to you, and the feeling of self-expression even, without being told who you are or how you should dress. He once said, "What is different about my point of view is pragmatism. The fashion world isn't the real world, and my aesthetic is a kind of hyperrealism. I'm not interested in trying to live in some kind of dream. I would be bored to death." And in another interview, he said, "I feel like my challenge and responsibility as a designer today is to question what beauty is. Why do we follow the rules from 50 years ago? I'm a refugee. I needed to look for beauty in everything." There is a certain emotional intelligence and depth in his work that I don't think is simply conceptual. I think it is biographical. Perhaps it's the kind of empathy that comes from, being a sad Eastern European guy with trauma. I think that when you have stared in the face of displacement and uncertainty, and the world judging your every move and not feeling at home everywhere you go, you cannot continue to treat other people, including women, as objects. You do not put them on a pedestal. You do not idealize them, because you sort of start seeing the world in more pragmatic manner, well, the way he said it. Moreover, I think there is an aspect of seeing women as, well, fellow survivors in the world that demands from you performance. And at Balenciaga, this has meant casting real people for the fashion shows. Waiters, artists, actors, friends, blurring the line between runway and street. His women are not gilded fantasy, they are reality, as he puts it when presenting couture. Here, femininity isn't only performed, it's shared, questioned, and redefined. And Demna's women aren't idealized, they are real, complicated, and part of a broader narrative. It's a radical departure, femininity as lived, not merely seen. And that would be incredibly funny of me to start this video by asking the question of where are the women and not talking about the women. So I decided that this video would be impossible without talking about some of the female creative directors, and well, the female creative director that I think we all think of when we reflect on these recent replacements in the fashion industry is Maria Grazia Curie at Dior, and her debut in 2016 at the brand was a global phenomenon, a very anticipated event which quickly went downhill. Although she was the first woman to ever helm the house, almost immediately she became a polarizing figure in online fashion discourse. On high fashion Twitter, she was a regular target for memes and calls to resign. And Anastasia Vartanyan, sorry if I mispronounced your name, in her article on Curie's tenure, summed it up by saying that Curie made clothes for moneyed women of a certain age who want to look elegant but not exactly push any fashionable boundaries. And compared to the high drama legacies of John Galliano or Alexander McQueen, Curie's Dior was restrained. She also called it beige, literally and figuratively, and there was embroidery, rich materials, and occasional beauty, but little of the operatic, risk-taking audiences had come to expect. On her debut, Curie told Vogue Runway, the message really is that there is not one type of a woman. However, this inclusivity was not reflected in casting. Plus-size models were almost entirely absent, with rare exceptions like costume looks. Her feminine messaging seemed clear from the start. For example, 2017 collection featured t-shirt with "We should all be feminist" slogan, and also her 2020 show suspended slogans all above the runway: patriarchy equals oppression, consent, patriarchy equals climate emergency. But as Anastasia noted, this belonged to the mid-2010s wave of commodified feminism, earnest in intent but aesthetically out of sync with the irony-driven visual culture of Gen Z. Curie also launched a mentorship for women at Dior in 2017 and frequently collaborated with women artists and artisans, suggesting she was one of the few creative directors to put her feminist rhetoric into tangible action. Yet, in the Debordian frame, this didn't translate into spectacle. Her shows felt grounded in real-life wearability rather than fantasy, which, in today's media ecosystem where runway clips are consumed like pop culture events, can make a designer seem invisible. However, Anastasia underscores a broader tension. The corporate priority for Dior was clear. Under Curie, women's wear revenue quadrupled between 2018 and 2013. But the cultural capital among fashion's online avant-garde dwindled because she delivered product, not myth. In my opinion, Maria Grazia at Dior is a prime example, a prime case study of how the woman-centered design that is meant to be worn and not just looked at, which is not a spectacle, it's not a grand theatrical entrance, is mistaken for the lack of vision rather than simply being practical. So where does it leave us? In my opinion, this gender imbalance in fashion is not a product of a simple cause, nor it is a question of individual talent. It reflects deep historical precedents, entrenched industry hierarchies, and the evolving nature of fashion as a cultural product. From the royal court tailor to the celebrity creative director, power in women's wear has long been tied to those who could most effectively author and project an image of woman for public consumption. In today's spectacle-driven economy, where the runway is as much a media event as it is a presentation, the qualities that make creative designer and creative director successful are not only about how well you can make a garment, and they have little to do with wearability. They also demand a skill in creating and working in the symbolic domain, creating symbols and images and feeling that resonates with the audience. The gay male designer, situated both within and outside traditional male-gaze dynamic, has often proven uniquely effective at this image making. Yet other models exist, some like Maria Grazia Curie ground their vision in lived experience and practical empowerment, even if that resists the demands of high drama. Others like Demna challenge the very boundaries of who fashion is for and what it can look like. These different approaches reveal that there is no single formula for success in women's wear design, only different alignments between the designers, the audience, and the machinery of the fashion system. The conversation then is not just about who holds the position, but about what the position is for. Is the creative director a tailor, a storyteller, a cultural provocateur, or all three at once? As long as fashion remains both an industry and an image economy, those questions will keep shaping who gets to define what woman looks like and why. And to summarize this discussion from my side, I think what is important to understand is that gay male creative director is structurally ideal if it's perfectly into this spectacle that fashion is trying to produce. But this little case study is simply a curious inquiry from me to consider why things happen the way they do. And also, if you have any thoughts on this topic, I would love to hear that. I understand that this video might not have touched on every single aspect. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave the thumbs up. And I'm very happy that I got to deliver that to you. And I'm very excited to read your thoughts. So hopefully see you in the next one. Bye-bye.